So thank you. First, I would like to say, I mean, something that I believe is common sense, but it isn't, that we begin to use our community-based organizations, our nonprofit organizations to help us in city government to deal with some of the issues that we deal with collectively. Sometimes we believe as city government that we have to do everything, and we don't. What we should be doing is making sure that these organizations that have been doing the work for a long time have funding so they can continue the work that they've been doing, and being able to force organizations through the idea that you're giving them money to collaborate with one another, to do things collectively, to begin to solve larger problems that you have in the city. And I think that foundationally, that's what we should be working on right away, and begin to create partnerships with the county government and with the state government as well to deal with very intractable issues like homelessness, like housing development, the issues that were talked about down there in terms of using the tax credits from the state, combining it with tax abatements, combining it with the private sector to create affordable housing and to create more affordable housing, or using the housing authority, working with the housing authority to create transitional housing for residents without addresses, to put them in units that are not developed, that you work with the housing authority to open those units up so you can put more people in housing. So working together collaboratively is something that we should be doing. We don't usually do that. We are usually in our silos, but this is what this environment is forcing us to do right now, to begin to depend on one another, every single day. Everything that we do, everything that we think of in the city now has to be done with partners. There's almost nothing that we can do at this point on our own, specifically because of the decreasing revenue that we have access to, but also the largeness and the wideness of the problem that we have to begin to involve everybody else. I'd be remiss not to talk about this. I'm going to end on the fact that we have something called the Newark Alliance in our city, which really sits all of the eds and meds, the larger corporations, small development organizations, obviously the universities, the hospitals, city government. We sit on an alliance together to talk about not just the economic prosperity of the city or investing in small businesses or using UEZ dollars to create free transportation for Newark residents. We also talk about how to solve for homelessness, how to build drop-in centers. We talk about how to solve crime in the city, how to reduce crime. All of these things are talked about by the largest corporations to the smallest kind of businesses in the city at a round table that meet collectively. And using them helps us to get other resources and revenue as well. So they just don't sit there and pontificate. They also go in their pocket and write checks to invest in very specific things that we need in the city.
And so that question was a general question for any one of the panelists, so I'll just repeat the question. What specific actions can municipal leaders take today to enhance financial flexibility, foster collaborative networks, and maintain community resilience during future policy transitions? Anyone can take the question.
I think, thank you, Mayor Barak. I really echo what you just said about building collaborative partnerships. So I also sit on the board of the Newark Regional Business Partnership. Actually, will be chair this year, so I know we're going to work very closely together. But as a bank, again, we really try to understand what the needs of the communities are. We recently met with one of the towns, and they said, Mary, banks offer pretty much the same products. What are you going to do different for our constituents? And we said, okay, let's see, what are the needs, right? Let's understand. So we did a lot of research first of what the needs were. And he said, I have an auction coming up. I have an auction for houses coming up. And I said, well, what if we did a first-time homebuyer seminar prior to that auction? We pre-qualify your constituents. We help them understand what they can afford. He said, you're probably one of the first banks that came to do that. I said, we've recently got into the schools. I know Wilda Diaz is in the room. Wilda is our branch manager of Perth Amboy, but she's got into the new high school multiple times now to do financial literacies and really, again, run programs that probably there's a need, but maybe the town with the funding not being the way it normally was, can afford to do things like that. So, we really work very, very closely with the towns that we serve to understand when funding does get cut, how can we be a partner as opposed to just being a bank there, in the town itself.
I think to also amplify everything is that don't be afraid to leverage your partners. I think the benefit of our partnership is we want to be creative in our thinking, but if you invite others to the table with your brainstorming, you're gonna come up with a more creative solution. So one of the things where we're looking at with the recreation complex, this started out as a warehouse where we wanted something where Plainfield would be a destination. So we actually went out after recreation complexes and aligned people. That led us to our operator for the Center of Excellence, which is the Community Cultural Center. That person happens to be the operator of Chelsea Piers. Chelsea Piers brought us the operator for the recreation to get us Pickle Rage and to get us an amusement park. And then the other part of it is sometimes you have your partnership or you have your friends and you make sure that you want to have your friends before you need them. So some of the things where you might not know how to use them right away, but with workforce development, we had an opportunity to redevelop one of our city municipal facilities for a workforce development center focused on construction and the trades. Also looking at there are other opportunities where we have general contractors and we want to support municipal set aside for minority business owners. So we have 2 of our minority general contractors that are operating that center. We're going to expand that in the coming year to really leverage the neighborhood revitalization tax credit, where we're looking at workforce development, we're looking at wraparound services for soft skills. We're also going to be able to work with some of our partners that may focus on reentry citizens, whether we're talking about citizens that are returning from being institutionalized, or if you're looking at people that are aging out of childcare. You may not know when you have that meeting with someone who has a meeting with you and say, this is some of the things I want to do. You may not be able to do it right then, but you may be able to call. Just saw someone downtown today where they were talking about a youth corps, and we're going to be able to use that youth corps now with the neighborhood realization. So I think leveraging your partners really can advance some of the things where you're not as dependent on looking at federal funds.
And at this time, we will go to the questions that were prepared for the individual panelists, and this one goes to Dr. McLean. Dr. McLean, given the restructuring and defunding of some of their agencies like HUD, how can local organizations and cities pivot to find new support for housing initiatives?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So I'll start off by saying we can't control what the federal government does back in Washington and how they choose to spend their dollars. But what we can do is control our readiness to be able to utilize those dollars as well as tap into our partners. My colleagues along the panel have talked about diversification. A couple of things that I advise my clients, because I've taken on from being the chief's chief to the illustrious Honorable Marcia Fudge, I gotta say it, as well as President Biden, because I want to make sure that we provide them, that put the respect on those names as we see it, to really be taking that role and continuing on with mayors and governors at the local level, because that's where we're going to get things done. Some of the things that we can do is, formalize things such as the mayor's housing coalitions that mayors across the United States, and definitely here in New Jersey, are doing. We do it a lot on the East Coast because we only have so much land. Making sure that financially our houses are in order. and when I say that, is looking at where do we have those funds that are being underutilized? How can we take those funds and reprogram them in the proper way to ensure that the areas that need it the most are actually getting it? Also, diversification of our revenue streams. One of the things that I hear a lot from my clients is, well, what dollars are available? Everything from tapping into the federal dollars that are still available on looking at grants.gov, HUD, transportation, etc., but also looking at the philanthropic side of the house. A lot of corporations now they know that workforce housing is an issue. They know that we can't build our way out of this, out of the housing deficit. We know that we are short as of last year, end of last year, about 3.2 million units. That number will continue to grow. So how do we take what we have and revitalize it? How do we look at our zoning laws so that, and regulations, so that we're able to build? For example, I was in Colorado. They had an underutilized, and I would venture even to say abandoned strip on one of their main roads. The bones were good of the actual building. They did put mixed-use housing. They put green spaces. They looked at way to bring in revenue. Some other things that I would say really make a difference is looking at the standing MOUs that we have across our cities and counties, and being able to say, okay, how do those MOUs serve us? If they don't serve us, how can we expand them, change them, so that we are meeting the need of today? We cannot rely on the federal government to do that for us, but what we can do is lift us up across our nation to be able to do that. Also, rapid response pods. When we know that when emergencies hit, when we had Hurricane Sandy hit us, that was huge. We came together as a nation to be able to do that. We came together as an East Coast to be able to do that. How do we codify that? How do we make that as a normal way of doing business, so that by the time FEMA comes in, FEMA is just put the Band-Aid on it and wait for the funding to begin to flow. The same thing with SBA, the same thing. How do we partner with our local banks to make that happen? That is what those rapid response pods are, and that is what I'm coaching my wonderful mayors to be able to do, so that they're able to take care of their communities and the people that they serve.
Next, we will go to Mayor Rasbaraka with this question. In light of recent changes to federal policies and fiscal frameworks, what challenges or adjustment has Newark made to maintain essential services for its residents?
I think an example of that is what happened just recently around SNAP. When the government was closed and they stopped funding people's SNAP, immediately we had to call all of our partners together in the city. In about an hour, we put together a strategy of creating hubs in every ward where we fed people, an online portal where individuals could call in, can fill out an application and get resources, excuse me, for their rent or for other emergencies that they had if they were getting SNAP at that time. And pulling together the community food banks and the private sector through HelloFresh, donating meals to us as well. So everybody got together, and that is an immediate example of the kind of strategies that we need to use. But on top of that, I think this is an opportunity for us to be a lab of democracy in our cities, for us to try as many things as possible, using the backdrop of the fact that they're forcing us into these situations, to be able to see what it looks like to begin to depend on ourselves, right? This whole idea of cutting Medicaid should drive us into the concept of what it would look like to actually fund our own health care in the state of New Jersey. What it would look like to begin to get municipalities together to support the self-funding of health care in our cities. What does it look like if we take, abandoned properties in the city of Newark and begin to sell them at very low prices, give people tax abatements at the same time, create a land trust, and then allow these properties to be sold for individuals at affordable rates in the city, right? These are things you wouldn't be thinking about in normal times. So because we're in these crucial times, you begin to think about things in a more flexible way, right? And we have to allow ourselves to do that, and we paint ourselves into a box, say, well, you can't do this, we can't do that, we can't do this, we don't have the resources to make this happen. Well, we don't have the resources either way, so we have to figure out how to get these things done. And I would end by echoing what was just said. We have to lean on the private sector and the philanthropic sector. We absolutely have to. They make money in our cities. They're still their bottom line is being met. In fact, some of them are making more money in a difficult time for us. So we have to lean on them to, in fact, be a part of what the solution is going to be overall, because we say when we all do well, we all do well. If you want to make money, you have to make sure the community is stable. If the community is stable, then your business becomes stable. And so it's important for us to get them to invest. We need to get the banks to use their CRA dollars to begin to invest in housing and small business development in our communities. We have to get them to do that in a collective way, not just in an individual way, but in a collective way, and joining with us at the same time. Because diversification is not going to work for us in some instances, because taxes is our money, grants are our money. Now, if the federal government is threatening our grants, then that's a whole half of our diversification gone right away, because we're not just going to change our wording and say we're not going to take care of people in threat that you're not going to give us any money so we can't take care of our folks. We're not going to do that. So we have to figure out how to replace those dollars.
Next, we'll go to Mary McFinsky, who will answer the question, what strategies or tools have proven most effective in helping municipal leaders strategize, anticipate, and adapt to the changes in the economy?
So, I think the biggest thing that we do is we become an advisory partner, right? We don't go into a municipality and just start, again, talking about solutions and products that we sell. It's more in an advisory capacity. I'm a very visual person and like to give you real things of what we've done. Recently we went into one of the municipalities, and actually it was one we met here last year and had conversations with them after the fact. And after just reviewing what they were doing, we realized, wow, they're not real efficient when it comes to payments. They're not real efficient with receiving the money in. So we really were, very consultative to help them to to make it more efficient. But what we also found is that they hadn't really talked to their banks too often. And when we reviewed the statements, we're like, wow, we were able to give them an extra $250,000 a year in interest than they were getting. So it was like, I said to them, do you know how many programs you could run with that? Or how many FTE you could hire? And they were like, my gosh, they just really, I guess they run really fast and didn't have the time. And, thankfully from a networking that we did, one of these events, we followed up and continued talking with them. But, I think they realized that, again, they said it's very different than the conversations they've had in past with banks. So, and Mayor Baraka, we'd be happy to partner on those CRA dollars. We're looking constantly to how we can do that. So I know we'll be following up with that. But again, we really want to be more of a consultative than just a products and solutions bank.
Next, we'll go to Director Fields, who will tell us how Plainfield has leveraged partnerships, funding opportunities, and local leadership to develop its Center of Excellence.
Okay, so Mayor Mapp, I'm gonna start with the local leadership because you are the local leadership. But I think that for those of us that believe that luck is when preparation meets opportunity, I think under the leadership of Mayor Mapp, with looking to advance the Center of Excellence since the beginning, of his administration, there came an opportunity where we found not only one developer that was willing to partner to look at it for affordable housing, but also able to say to that partner that traditionally worked in affordable housing and market rate, you also have to bring on a minority partner. So it is people that look like us that are developing in our community. Then the next part of it is with funding opportunities, you're really looking at where Keene, they hosted the New Jersey Economic Development Administration where they had an open house. This open house really explained all the resources that were out there that municipalities could leverage, whether you were looking at tax credit programs, looking at workforce development, looking at historic preservation, or looking at what you were doing for cultural arts. It was a new funding source that we didn't know about, but it definitely fit what we were trying to do with the Center of Excellence, with having a cultural center. And then the last part with your partnerships is really always maintaining that ongoing conversation with them, because you're gonna find something that's mutually beneficial to everyone.
So as you look ahead, can you tell us what is the long-term plan to sustain and grow the initiative over the next 3 to 5 years?
So I think what also sustains the initiatives is really maintaining that partnership and looking what we can do next. And just giving, for example, like we talked for a bit about community shuttle. So a community shuttle, you can use urban enterprise zone seed money to provide a shuttle where that's gonna get you to your doctor's appointment, it's gonna get you to your job. And it's a free shuttle, but we don't just wanna start something and stop it. So a way to connect us to the developers where they are getting market rate revenue is that it can be a part of their community benefit. They're coming to you because it's a business. They want to make money off of their developments that they're doing. But the community benefit is an opportunity to say, okay, how can we make a contribution to this community that's going to be lasting? So for example, for the next 5 years, we're setting up funding where we have our community shuttle funded by these developers. Then that's a part of their community contribution agreement. Their contributions are ranging from that community shuttle anywhere from, we're starting out, they're providing $300,000 to the largest one is going up to 2.75 million, and that's going to be over the course of the 5 years. So it's not just going to be a splash in the pan, and it's going to be lasting. Another part of it too is we're looking at sustaining something, is making sure that we are sustainable in our workforce, where it's not just the developers, they're coming in and leaving, but we're investing in developing skill sets that carpenters, they can work in our community, electricians, they can work in our communities, and they can take their skill sets to other communities. So we're contributing to the growth of our residents. And then thinking about sustainability and general resilience. How are we doing in terms of solar, looking at green infrastructure, to making sure that we are maintaining our community footprint and not necessarily deteriorating it for the future.
And so I'll come back to you right now, Mary. How can financial institutions like Popular Bank partner with municipalities to sustain local projects and infrastructure initiatives affected by reductions in federal funding?
So I talked a little bit before about our foundation. So we have a foundation that is fully employee funded. So the employees chip in every paycheck, and then they not only do we have the money, but the time too. The employees go out and give their time. I want to say almost all of our branch managers sit on nonprofit boards. So we really try to make sure that that money, we open it up every August for any nonprofit to apply, but it's got to be specific. It's got to be specific of what the need is. You know, are they going to run, you know, programs for kids? You know, what the programs that they're going to use the money for. So again, we really try to be out in the communities that we serve and provide funding of things that are much needed programs that I'm sure the municipalities would love to do, but partner with the nonprofits in the communities to do them. And a lot of the nonprofits, you know, the grants that they have gotten cut, whereas this year we actually awarded probably the most we ever did out to these nonprofits. So I think that's one of the things that we do very, very well to try to help. The other thing I mentioned it earlier is the funding that we provide for the affordable housing. So, you know, that again is one of the strengths that the bank has, is being able to do that financing, and we understand what the need is. We work not only with the customer, who's the builder or the construction person, but with the town to understand, you know, making sure that it's meeting all the requirements, it's done in a very, very quick way. You know, the funding's there at each stage to make sure that we can get these homes built. With the nonprofits as well, we've got one in Newark that we're working with right now that has land and wants to build affordable housing, so we're meeting with them to, again, provide that funding for them, whereas, you know, I can tell you from my experience, some banks shy away from the nonprofits and don't want to provide funding, where we think right now is the most important time to be out in front of them. So, you know, that's, you know, just something that we do that we really do believe helps in the communities that we serve.
Now I'll go back to Dr. McLean, who will tell us how local governments and community partners innovate or collaborate to expand affordable housing access when federal funding streams are unstable or declining.
So right now, cities, regardless of what the federal government does, thrives under federal uncertainty, because we don't know what's going to happen, what that federal budget's going to look like, what agency you're going to cut. I'll be the first one to tell everyone, federal agencies don't receive all their budgets that they ask for from Congress. Bottom line. If we knew the full scope at the federal level of what each agency did and provided that information directly to Congress, Congress could not fund it all. There would be a huge uproar. But what we can do is work together to do it. First, taking that people-centered approach, looking at the social determinants of health. In plain language, everybody needs a roof over their head. They shouldn't have to wonder at night where they are going to lay their head down. I don't care who you are, what you look like, what you do for a living. People need food in their stomach. We've got a huge issue with food insecurity right now. People also need work. Most people, I don't know anybody that I have met, whether it's in Skid Row in California, or in New York, or in DC, that said that they chose to live on the street. So if we look at taking a holistic approach, essentially building the ecosystem that Mayor Barack talked about, that is how we begin to tackle the issues and address the needs of our communities. It's working with our bank partners and, quite frankly, holding them to account and saying, okay, you're giving us loans, but what are the criteria that you're utilizing for loans? Because if I'm a college student, or I have graduated from college, I will be the first one public, and you can hear it in any testimony that I've said, I have $1,832.16 that I pay every single month for student loans. It's exactly, that's how I'm feeling about it right now. But imagine being a college student coming out of undergrad, having that. What are those criteria that we're looking at, whether you're renting, whether they're looking to buy their first home? How do we incentivize developers, whether they're affordable developers, full market rate, I don't care what what you're trying to do. How do we incentivize you to give people that opportunity to have those basic needs met? The other things that I would say, global partnerships. We talked about local partnerships. We have sister cities across the globe. This is not just a US issue. Our global community is fighting the exact same sorts of fights. They're trying to meet the needs. So how do we talk to and create forums for all of us to come together to say, Mayor Barack, I know what you're doing here in Newark. I know what we're doing in Plainfield. How are you doing it? What are the things that you've experienced? And this is what I'm experiencing in Warsaw, so that we can learn from one another. We're not relying on the federal government to do it, but how do we leverage consortiums such as the New Jersey Urban Mayors Association to be able to bring folks together so that we're learning from one another. We're able to tap into the resources, not just locally, but how do I tap into global banks that are interested in ensuring that the entire global community is taken care of, regardless of what nation that you live in, what state you live in, what city you live in. Public-private partnerships. Opportunity Zone 2.0 was the best thing that I've heard of out of the big beautiful bill, and I'll leave that opinion to myself. But what that did was that it codified opportunity zones where in the past it was not codified. How do we take and partner with corporate America? How to say universities, corporations, nonprofits? These are the communities that have been selected for the opportunity zones. How do we push to be a part of that selection process? How do we, as a collective Urban Mayors Association, submit our association for those opportunity zone areas? They do the selection process once a year. They do a down select, which comes out with 9 cities at the end of the day, and that's a cumulative total of 20 years of direct support and partnership across the entire system. And it's not just looking at what's good for the corporations, because they need us, but it's looking at what does the community need, how can corporations be good partners to it, universities, how do we bring in that educational piece, because we need the workforce for tomorrow, so that they're not paying $1,832.18 every month to put a doctor behind their name. Our kids deserve better than that. And last but not least, just how do we look at being creative and innovative in the things that we do? We have the brain power. We have the knowledge within our communities. And so we can do this together.
Thank you, Dr. McLean. The last question before we go to the audience will go to Mayor Rat Baraka, who will tell us how Newark's past planning or long-term vision position his city to stay ready or steady and continue delivering services amid federal uncertainties.
First, I just want to say that every city where we are should be an opportunity zone without competition with one another because of long-standing obstacles that have been purposely and deliberately put in the way of these communities to make it difficult for us to develop. Newark is the average income, before I go on this, the average income of folks in Newark is about $38,000. Housing, in order for us to develop affordable housing in the city of Newark, we would have to do it at 30% of the area median income to get everybody. 30% of the area median income of what HUD sets as affordable rates. People think that the developer sets affordability, but they don't. People say, oh, this is affordable not but for who? Why is the developer doing that? The developer is going based on what the federal government states is affordable. In order for us to get to all of you, that number has to drop all the way to 30%. And so that has to be subsidized. The federal government has to be in the business of subsidizing that, along with the state. When that does not happen, then we have to be very creative about using the private sector through CRAs, through other kind of opportunities that we have, levers that we have through tax abatements, other kind of things to help lower, you know, the AMI, the area median income, so we can get everybody, we can get families. You know, the good thing the state did was pass a law that says now you have to build, you know, 3-bedroom units in affordable units, because before that they would only do studios, and those were for individuals. Families couldn't move into these places that we're building. So in terms of the long-term planning that we did, inclusionary zoning is a part of that. Us having an inclusionary zoning law in Newark, which the state is copied, by the way. The 20% affordability forces people to now understand when they develop that they have to have affordable units in their property. With the state's help, now they have to build 3 bedrooms in those units, which helps us put families in them. Our negotiations now include properties in the city of Newark that are building about 35% of the area median income. We're not there, we're almost there, right? 35% of the area median income means they're capturing more people than they normally would have captured without us having the prior planning. Our zoning ordinance, changing in our zoning ordinance, allows us to create more density, build more housing, allow developers to use their money to create sustainability, green roofs, right? Plant more trees, right? They have to do these things now, right? So now when you're building, you have to actually plant trees when you're building. The developers think it's crazy, but you know, obviously, we know that it helps us with long-term sustainability. We're not getting any more money from anybody to help us plant trees. Now you got to help us plant the trees. Whether they're helping us with our water infrastructure, building a sewer system, or connecting water rates, water systems, that helps us when developers do that as well. So our zoning ordinance goes a long way. Our Creative Catalyst Fund that we started during COVID now helps us to continue to fund arts organizations, arts institutions, and the individual artists to continue to paint murals, to continue to do public art work throughout the city, which in turn, to me, creates economic growth and economic development in those areas in that community as well. And the last thing I would say is a whole list of things, but I get the sign up here. But the last thing I would say is that we have to put money in the hands of people. And sometimes we think that we should have the money because we know what to do with it. People know how to spend money, right? They know that they're going to spend money on housing, on rent, on clothes, on food. You have to put money in people's hands. And affordable housing, we have to get small developers to give them the opportunity to develop 1-family homes, 2-family homes on their own, 3-family homes, and partner with nonprofits that are doing the same thing. Look, the Urban League is doing an amount of housing in Newark. They're developing affordable home ownership in the city as well. I think if we put money in, and we try to do it, property in the hands of local residents, they are going to develop affordable housing because they're building housing for their neighbors. And so our strategy is putting property in their hands, putting money in their hands to help them develop the houses that are vacant, that are abandoned, and then you start to see a lot of infill development going on in the city of Newark that are not being built by huge developers, but by small guys and small ladies that are building 1-family, 2-family, and 3-family homes in the blocks they were born and raised in.
Now is the opportunity for us to hear from you in the audience. If you have a question, please come to the microphone that's in the center. And if you can state your name and tell us what municipality you're from, that will help us to identify who's in the room. So now is your opportunity. Please step forward if you have any questions.
Hi, good morning. I'm Pamela McNeil. I represent the city of Newark. The question I have, The question that I have this morning is pertaining to affordability of housing and economically housing. So my question is, what is your opinion with respect to accessory dwelling units being implemented?
We all got a lot.
So our zoning ordinance includes accessory dwelling units. The new zoning ordinance that we just passed It has been a big fight throughout the state, so everybody has not been supportive of ADUs. But we, through hook and crook, I don't want you to think it was easy for us to get it passed in Newark. It was a fight, but we got it passed. And accessory dwelling units allows you to add on to your home, right? Maybe you could put your parents, your kid from college, somebody in your community that you want to caretake. I always tell people it'd be great if you could, if there was somebody in your family that's disabled, or your grandmother or somebody, instead of paying for them to live in a home somewhere, right, where people are not caring for them, they could live in your place, and the Medicaid and that they're collecting could come to you while you take care of the folks in your home with an ADU. And policy-wise, the state needs to get on board so we can begin to not penalize people through taxes if they build an ADU on their home, to help them save dollars, because what they're doing in essence is building affordable housing, which saves the state a whole lot of money for investing in affordable housing, because if you build it, we should give you the resources.
I agree. Thank you. I'd like to hear from your maps as well.
Yep. And we have also passed an accessory dwelling unit ordinance in the city of Plainfield. And it's important that we do this, because even young graduating college students who don't want to return home and live with mom and dad, who want to live independently on their own, this would work very well for them, because the affordability challenge that we all face, our returning college students face that as well. And so ADUs would go a long way in helping them as well. So we are all in Plainfield when it comes to ADUs, and I wish that other parts of the state would do the same, so as to make more housing affordable to the many people who are looking and seeking decent, affordable housing.
Thank you.
Are there any other questions from the audience?
Hi, my name is Stacy Thomas. I'm with UCEDC. We are a nonprofit economic development corporation. We work with small businesses. We offer free entrepreneurial training as well as low interest loans, and we can partner with both banks and with municipalities to offer, programs for small businesses and that sort of thing. And I'm just wondering how small businesses and investing in small businesses plays into, your communities, and how we can leverage those kinds of relationships.
So we have partnered with the UEDC before for workforce development. I think it would be very helpful. We have small business technical assistance and marketing. We also have annual business expo that comes up. We have an accelerator that's located in Plainfield, but in terms of partnering with small business, one of the things that we offer, we are only able to offer through the UEZ funds assistance with helping with the exterior of their business. In terms of leasing assistance, we depend on other entities. So if you have anything like the EDA has with leasing assistance or additional technical assistance, we offer entrepreneurial workshops. We would welcome it.
All right.
But the reality is, like in Newark, we have activation of corridor dollars that we use through Invest Newark, and also we partner with Audible, who also helps us have reactivation dollars. We go to small businesses, ask them to come into the city, obviously, or move from the other part of the city to come downtown, the other corridors that we're trying to repurpose. And we actually pay for build out of the, because sometimes you want a property, there's nothing in there, so you have to build it out. We pay for build out, we pay for a couple of months rent at the same time. to give them this kind of grant and incentive to move their business in these communities where we're trying to move from abandoned retail to get more people in those retail fronts. And so we use that, and Invest Newark has been very, very, very important for us. But also they do training and classes for us and bonding. We also deal with back office paperwork that they have to deal with, and sometimes we front people cash up front so that they can be able to compete for bids and bids and projects in the city they could not do, because in order to win a bid or do work in the municipality, you have to do the work first, and then we pay you later. And sometimes the later is 90 days later. And most small businesses can't afford to wait 90 days, right? And so we try to front some of the cash up front, so that way you can do the job and still not go bankrupt at the same time.
From a national perspective, small businesses make up the vast majority of our economic base, just across the United States. And so when we support our small businesses, we are not only helping the US's economic base, but we're also helping families. Because without those small businesses and the number of people that they employ, it becomes kind of that secondary and tertiary effect. So if that small business doesn't exist, now now their employees don't have jobs, which means now they're having to look to the cities or the federal government for things such as SNAP, housing support. So that is from a macro perspective, how supporting our small businesses, whether they're through supporting the additional the upfront dollars to reducing the barriers for them to begin business. Because I will tell you, just starting an LLC, holy smokes, there's more paperwork than the law should allow. How do we support our small businesses in reducing those barriers? How do we help them with the paperwork without having to pay people to get that started? You don't have that money. So at the end of the day, really supporting our small businesses through organizations such as UEDC, that's really what helps us.
Great, thank you so much. I think there's a lot of opportunity there. I agree, like putting money into the hands of individuals is absolutely where it's at, and it's a multiplier effect, right? Like if you give to the small businesses, they give to their communities. And I think that there's sometimes missed opportunity in, you have the banks and the CRAs, they can work with entities like ours to then give money to the small businesses, which then creates that multiplier effect. And I think that we work in silos when sometimes if we work together more effectively, even with the SNAP benefits, right? What if the bank gave CRA money to an entity like ours, and then we dispersed it to the small businesses and they're feeding our communities, right? I think we need to think a little bit more, broadly and for more opportunity, but this is really great, and thank you so much, I really appreciate it.
Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
My name is Crystal Feliciano. I'm a city councilwoman at large in the city of Trenton. This has been great. I just want to say thank you, thank you, thank you. It's my first time coming to the league. I've had some medical issues in the past that prohibited me from being in attendance, but now I am here, and I'm grateful for this and for the information that you have given. When it comes to dealing with small businesses in the city of Trenton, I wanted to touch the people where they are, right? And so we did something where we talked about doing business with Trenton. And so I had our UEZ coordinator come, and we did a series of workshops about how to bid, how to get the proposal in, how to get the qualifications in. And then we started creating the list of those businesses and what those people did to funnel it throughout the department, so that when they didn't have to go for the bid, but you wanted someone that was qualified for certain services, well, now here we have the list of the people right in the city that want to hand into what's going on. And then I had First Bank. Keisha is wonderful. Plug for Keisha on Warren Street in Trenton. She came in and we talked about the funding opportunities, right? How they can apply for the small business loans and what it is. And then they talked about the paperwork and everything that would be needed. So when we talk about that partnership, that is very, very important. But I just wanted to say thank you so much. I've taken a lot of notes, and I'm excited to go back and talk to my colleagues in the administration about some things that we can look into to help make Trenton just a little bit better. Thank you.
Well, we thank you.
I apologize, Mayor, this is going to be way off topic, but I just want to say thank you for your stand at ICE. And I think it's a mitzvah. I believe it's a mitzvah, which is Yiddish for it's a good deed, and I think you should be acknowledged for it. So I just wanted to personally say thank you.
Good morning, all. My name is Judith Sanchez, and I'm from the city of Passaic. Given the recent reduction in government funding, what additional resources or non-government partnerships can municipality explore to strengthen the homelessness services?
I think you were blushing when I said it.
Well, resources are always a challenge, but to the extent that we are able to use some of the existing funds that we have, whether it's a CDBG grant that we have, we ought to do as much as we can to help folks that are not in a home, and oftentimes it is not by their choosing. Sometimes it's some mental crisis that they're facing that leads to homelessness. And so I believe that we at the local level, we have an obligation to do all that we can to provide resources to the people that need those resources the most. And so we just have to look at our budgets and see where we could identify resources that can be steered in the direction of those that are crying out for those resources. But we also have to continue to press hard in terms of our search for grants that would go towards helping to provide those services.
I tell you, as a bank, we do something very different in that we finance shelters. So we have big developers that are building multifamily homes in Newark and other towns, but we encourage them to also invest in the shelters, and we have financed several projects recently, and that's different, I can tell you, than what other banks would do. But, you know, again, we know what our communities need and how important they are, so we do encourage some of these developers that may not normally be looking at that to do it and provide financing for it.
Thank you.
Just let me also add, you know, as I go to conferences and I step off the train or I'm driving through different cities, I see the homelessness crisis. It's not unique to Plainfield, it's not unique to Patterson, to New Jersey. It's a nationwide crisis which needs to be addressed at the national level. And so we have to advocate for the appropriate level of funding and attention to be given to those who are crying out for help, especially those who are in, you know, homeless shelters or who are on the street because of a mental crisis that they may be facing. Because too often the people that are on the street have an issue where they need some kind of medical, social intervention to get them out of the condition that they're in. And so we have to advocate at the federal level for resources that are needed on the ground in our local municipalities.
In terms of resources, I would say the DCA on the state level, the county governments are actually responsible for welfare and social welfare. They collect taxes, we just got to get them to spend it in the areas that we need the money at the most. You know, specifically if you live like, I would say Passaic County, Passaic probably, in places like Passaic and Patterson probably have the lion's share of homelessness in the county, but I'm sure you're not getting the lion's share of the dollars, right? So that's a discussion about how to repurpose those dollars that go to communities that need it the most. And I would argue that, so there are different kinds of homelessness. I think what we're talking about is chronic homelessness, because that's what people see. And people sleeping on the street is chronic homelessness. But there are people homeless that are not on the street. right? And some of those people are in shelters and they're using the shelters as their housing, right? And that's what's backing the whole system up. So you have people using the shelters as housing, they have a little bit of money because there's a housing problem, they're sleeping in the shelters, and while they're financing shelters, what we should be financing really is transitional housing. Putting people into transitional spaces to move them into permanent housing. Shelters is for emergencies, right? There's an emergency. We get ESG dollars from the federal government, and that's emergency shelter money. Shelters should be emergency, but people are in shelters for 5 years, right? And that's transitional, right? We should be figuring out how to put money in transitional housing and getting housing navigators and building more affordability to put people in permanent housing from transition and moving away from sheltering. Because now sheltering is just really, the people who really need the shelters, that's chronic homeless, can't get in the shelters because the folks who don't belong in there are in there for 3 or 4 years, right? And so we have to fix that whole system and use the dollars, state dollars, DCA, county dollars, put it together in the private sector, because the private sector helps us a lot in Newark. So I got to shout out the private sector. They realize that people sleeping on the street in front of their business affects their business. So they help us fund outreach organizations that go out and talk to people and pull them off the street. The problem is we put people in shelters and the shelters are getting full. You know how much money we spend for one shelter? $400,000 a month. That's how much it costs to shelter people. This is expensive. We can use that $4 million to invest in transitional housing, to do all kinds of other things, but we spending money on shelters because that's an immediate fix and it makes us all feel good, right? But it's not solving the problem.
Thank you.
Well, we thank you. This brings us to the end of this session. We appreciate all of you attending. And those of you needing CEUs, remember to scan out. I want to thank the panelists. Let's hear it for the panelists. Enjoy the rest of your day, and I'll see you soon.